IT security. A cornerstone of the IT industry that seems to be for most of the time is a small subject until things go awfully wrong. And self-hosting is no exception. When we are hosting our own applications, we tend to sometimes maybe overthink or not think hard enough about the security implementation that we have to protect our infrastructure. 2 years ago, we ventured into Authelia, and we were the first to generate a easy to follow and fully in-depth guide on Authelia and how to use it. Since then, plenty of other videos have come out from other content creators, and we still think it's a topic that changes very often, and so naturally we need to update our work as well. For those who know, our docs page has been one of the most important resources, and we've constantly been updating the Authelia guide over the years with everything that we continue to learn from ourselves and from our community members. However, this time we did a complete overhaul. There's so many things that we learned in the process that the whole documentation really needed a cleanup and to be brought up to date with all the changes that Authelia themselves have implemented since our original video. So we hope today we can cross everything off and show you from start to finish how to get Authelia running on your server. We're also going to be putting up our Docker Compose files here on our docs as well. So for those who are using Docker or Docker Compose, feel free to follow through with the video because all the configuration steps and setting up of Authelia is the same across Docker Compose or on Unraid. It's only the initial install step where we're going to be showing on Unraid, but feel free to follow along so that you understand what's happening. But like I said, our Docker Compose is there so you can use that as well. Authelia is an open source authentication and authorization server. In short guys, if you have applications that you're self-hosting, you're reverse proxying them out, and you want to apply a layer of security, whether it's single factor or two-factor authentication, Authelia is the app for you. And it lays right over the top and it easily integrates with your reverse proxy. So from our previous guides, you'll see that we've shown it working with NGINX Proxy Manager, and then we also showed you in our Traefik guide a few weeks ago how to apply Authelia using labels. Keep in mind that once you implement Authelia, you can also disable your built-in auth on most apps so that you only have to sign into Authelia and then get straight into your application. If this sounds interesting and you want to lock down your apps and get started, then stick around. I think this is going to be the video for you. Without further ado, let's get stuck into it. Salam, Ibra Army, and welcome back to this week's video. Thank you for coming back and checking out the channel. As usual, we really appreciate having you here. If you like our work, you like what we're doing, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Join our Discord and be part of the discussion. We'd love to have you there. You can find all of our links in the description below. The first things first, guys, we're going to start with our docs. So as you can see, guys, we've really overhauled Authelia. We've done a lot of work getting it up to speed and getting it to where it is now. And the changes that we've made have made it a lot easier to follow for one, but also include a lot of tidbits that we didn't know about until we learned these things as time progressed. So I think you guys will really enjoy this. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be having the guide off screen as usual, and I'll be doing the video for you guys so that you can basically just watch the video if you so choose. But keep in mind that all the configuration files, as you can see here, and any other configuration that we've created templates for are on the docs page. I'm not going to link them here on YouTube. We have them here so that we can update one single source. So don't forget to read the sidebar when you're following the guide up above. We've also tried to hyperlink them where possible so that you can just click and it'll take you straight to the file that we are referring to. So while we do that, what we're going to do is jump into Unraid and we're going to get into the install real quick. Once we get to the install, guys, those who are following Docker, please use the Docker Compose file, and if you're using Docker Run, then you'll see the commands that we're using in the Compose file as well. After that, you can basically just follow along no matter what system you're running in terms of configuring Authelia, because it's going to be the same across the board. So let's move that over and let's just get stuck into the install. Okay, so here we are on our Unraid server. And as you can see, I've taken out Authelia, I've removed all of its dependencies so that we can go through it together and you guys can see everything that happens from start to finish in one easy to follow video. So first thing we're going to do is head over to the App Store. And before we actually install Authelia, we have to get some dependencies sorted out. So I'm going to talk you through what those dependencies are. First and foremost, having something like Code Server is going to be immensely helpful for you when it comes to us configuring and setting up our configuration files. It also allows us to validate the files and make sure they're correctly formatted. I think about 80% of the problems that we get from people coming into our Discord and asking for help with Authelia is usually the YAML formatting is completely wrong, or one extra space can basically break the file. So if you haven't watched our Code Server video, please go and do that, install it, get it set up. It's going to make your life a lot easier. It is optional, but I highly recommend it. What isn't optional though is Redis. So let's go into the App Store and we'll just search for Redis here. Now in our guide, we follow the one from A75G's repository. The reason why is because it uses the Bitnami image, which we just like to use. It seems to be very stable and does the job that we need it to. So from here, we'll go ahead and click install. And on the template installation screen, we're going to see a couple of options. So here's what we need to do. First, let's set our custom Docker network to IBRACORP or whatever your proxy network is. We have a video on custom Docker networks for you to follow as well. Make sure we've got that selected, then come down to the Redis port. 6379 is the default, and we're happy with that. With allow empty password, what we want to do is actually set that to no. And then in the password, we're going to put a password in here. So put in the password that you think is secure and relevant, and then we'll go from there. As you can see, I've just put in a simple password, and that's going to allow us to demonstrate where we're using the configuration later. So make sure you take a note of this because we're going to need it for Authelia in the following steps. Once you've got that, your app data location. Now this by default is actually not here. Okay, but we have it in our guide and we instruct you to add it. And the reason why we do that is quite simple. Basically, if you don't add this, Bitnami Redis will not actually save any configuration or caching files. So what that means is when you go to Authelia and you click on Remember Me, for example, without this path, it actually won't remember you at all, and you'll be finding yourself constantly signing in and out. And we got to give credit to a user over on the Unraid forums on our thread for IBRACORP who has suggested that, and that was over a year ago. So thank you to them for giving us that suggestion. With that all done, we're pretty much ready to go. So we can go ahead and click apply. Now, while that's loading, you guys might be wondering, what is Redis? So Redis is an in-memory data structure store, and it's used to store keys, memory key values, database cache, and a message broker with optional durability. So it really allows us to get transactional data in and out nice and quick, where it can be an instant cache, rather than writing to a full database like MariaDB, for example. So we'll click done, and you can see we've got Redis there, it's running. Let's check the logs and make sure. And that looks all good. We got ready to accept connection. So successfully started that. The next thing we're gonna install is MariaDB. Now I already have MariaDB here, and guys, we already did a video on setting up MariaDB and creating a database, and also using AdMiner, which I'll get to shortly. So if you don't have MariaDB, please just follow that video. It's gonna help you understand how it all works and get it set up. But in our case, it's already set up and ready to go. So I'm not gonna go over that here. So all we need to do here is now actually create a database on this database server for Authelia. And the easiest way that we like to do it is using something like AdMiner. You don't have to use it. You can use anything else you think is relevant. You can use the terminal as well, which we've included the instructions in the terminal. But I want to show you guys AdMiner because it is pretty useful. So we've opened up AdMiner. We've got our login credentials. We go ahead and click login. Now in here, you can see all these databases that we've already created. We need to create a new one for Authelia. So go ahead and click create database. In here, pretty straightforward. We're just going to call it Authelia. Leave the collation as is and click save. Okay, so now we've created a database. We need to create a user. So let's go ahead and go to privileges. And you can see I've already had this database before, so the user actually already exists. But if you didn't have it, you would go to create user. Now again, for the purpose of this video, I've just set the password to password MariaDB, and that will just allow us to see it in the config file. But please obviously generate a strong password and make sure you note it down, because again, we're going to need it in the configuration for Authelia. So once you've got the password, we click on all privileges, we scroll down and we click save. Like I said, I already had the user there, so I'm not going to need to create it again. And as you can see, we can, do everything here from a visual point of view. We don't need to use the terminal if we don't want to. We can look into other databases as well that already exist, so then you can check out, what sort of data is in there. Maybe you want to drop a table for whatever reason. You've got all the functions that you would normally have, of course. If you're experienced with databases, you may not want to use Adminer. But I think for the general public, you're not really used to databases and using the terminal to control them. I think Adminer is a very useful tool, and there are other similar tools that exist as well to allow you to do the same thing. So there's no discrimination, just depends what works for you. So guys, checking off the list, we now have Redis and we now have MariaDB. We have a database set up for Authelia in MariaDB. We're ready to go. So guys, as you probably guessed, the next step now is actually installing Authelia. We've got the dependencies done, which was Redis and MariaDB. And now we can install Authelia. So in the App Store again, if we just look up Authelia, you will see our template here from Psychotic's repository, which is us. Go ahead and click install. On the template screen, we're going to be setting some very similar stuff as before. So we want our custom Docker network set. Again, guys, on the MariaDB, that was also a custom Docker network too. So we're all on the same custom Docker network for everything here, okay? The web UI by default, 9091. If that suits you, just leave it as is. I highly suggest you just leave it as is. The app data config path, again, leave it as is. These following labels you see here are for getting Traefik to pick it up. Now, if you don't use Traefik, you're using NGINX proxy manager, for example, you do not need to add these labels. Okay, you do not need these here. They're not here by default in our template, so you won't even see them. If you do use Traefik, please follow our guide on Traefik because we've talked about that a little bit more, and also the written guide is there for you to follow as well, specifically setting Authelia in Traefik. Okay, so assuming you understand how all that works already because you watched our video 2 weeks ago, those are the labels for Traefik, and we're using Traefik here now, so we're just going to leave those as is. Nothing needs to change here. Once you're happy, go ahead and click apply. Now, as we've noted in our documentation, the Authelia container isn't going to start. It's going to exit straight away. Okay, now if we go here and we click on the logs, you're going to get an indication of why. The configuration did not exist, so a default one has been generated at that location. So we need to configure this. Now here's where Code Server is going to come in handy. If you are not using Code Server, you just want to use, your Notepad++ editor on your desktop, whatever the case might be, you need to open up the file to edit it. So just to demonstrate for you guys not using Code Server, you would need to navigate to the location where that file is. You may come across permissions issues doing this as well, so just keep that in mind. If you do have permissions issues, you can create the file on your desktop and then copy it in here. That's the easiest way to get around it. Otherwise, you can change the permissions if you know what you're doing. So here we have a configuration that's created for us, okay? But we're gonna go into Code Server and edit that now. Okay, so here we are in Code Server. I can see our app data location. Again, guys, Code Server, we have a video for, so you'll understand all this if you followed that. We have a configuration file. Let's click on that. And here's our default config that gets generated by Authelia. Now, if you have a look at this giant configuration file, you can see why people feel a little intimidated sometimes. And look, rightfully so, the comments need to be there because they explain exactly what's going on. Especially as the version of Authelia continues to change, more features keep getting added, so then they have to explain what's going on. So in our case, what we're going to do is actually go to our documentation that we've written, and we have a configuration file for you to just simply copy and paste. So let's highlight everything in here, we'll remove it, and we'll paste in our template. As you can see with our template, a lot smaller. And we'll start working our way through it now. So most of the work that we're going to be doing is done in this configuration file. This file is what tells Authelia how to work, what it needs to do, where it needs to send stuff. Basically we are configuring it and its behavior all from this file. So most of the time you're going to spend it in here troubleshooting stuff if you do need to troubleshoot something. And it's really important that you understand what each thing is doing. So we're going to walk through it together, guys. So bear with me. It's really important you stick with me here. Otherwise, you'll find yourself stuck and you won't know why. So let's start right at the very top. Theme, we've set dark as the default. There are light theme as well, and I think a gray theme. You can set that to whatever you prefer. When it comes to creating secrets, if you look under the Authelia tab here and under placeholders, you can see our link that we've put for secrets. Now this is just to help you generate them. you've got 128-bit option. So if we just click that, click on 128-bit, and it'll help you generate them. It's going to be a lot easier, okay? Now it's really important that as we go through, the different areas require different secrets. So you just generate them, but don't make them the same. It's for your own security. So with that key done, so we can just copy that, for example, and then we come into the JWT secret and we just paste that in. Okay, so we have a secret there, that's fine. The default redirection URL. Now, what that says is if you hit Authelia and Authelia doesn't have a rule to tell it where you want to be bounced onto later, once you've authenticated, you can set a default address where it'll say, okay, I'll just send it there anyway. Typically, that's going to be your main domain. So let's say in our case, IBRACORP.io, for example. Let's say that's the case. We just put IBRACORP.io, but perhaps maybe you have a different address you want it to forward onto. For all these details here, we do not need to make any changes. From our template, this is verified to be working. So we're just going to leave that alone. Log, we can leave that alone. You can change it if you want a little bit more info. You can set this to debug, for example, useful for troubleshooting. And this is your one-time PIN. So with the one-time PIN, we also want to set our issuer to our domain. So we'll set that to our domain. One important note I'll add is that you can only have one domain at this point in time configured in Authelia. So it's really important that you try and maintain consistency as you're going through the file. The period is 30 and the SKU is 1. We can leave that as is. Then you get to the authentication backend. Now, there are two different ways that you can authenticate a person in Authelia. You've got two options. Option 1 is using a simple YAML file with the user's encrypted credentials that Authelia can read. And option 2 is allowing Authelia to read from an LDAP database such as Free IPA or Active Directory. Now there is also OpenID option. I don't know if that's been implemented by Authelia yet, but I personally wouldn't suggest it just yet. Especially if you're self-hosting, you probably want to keep that all in-house. And so we give you both options. In our guide, in our written section, you'll see on the side that we provide you with your LDAP config for Free IPA and Active Directory. And we also provide you the user's database file template as well, if that's what you so choose. So by default in our template, we've got the file as the option being selected. As you can see here under authentication, it says we want to use a file. This is where the file lives, and these are the details we use in the file. Alrighty. This doesn't mean much to you, I'm sure, unless you know what it is, okay? But this is the encryption method and strength that we're going to be applying to the passwords in the file. Let me explain that a little further. What we'll do under Authelia, let's create a new file here, okay? And we'll call it users_database.yml. Okay, we're making sure that we spell it exactly like that, purely because that's what it's looking for here. In this file, we have our template. I'm going to copy that from our docs page, and there's our template. Okay, so users, we want to change the username. So we'll say psychotics, and display name. So maybe the username, you want to have a different display name when their name comes up in Authelia. I'll say psychotics guy. Under the password is where we need to put in this encrypted password. How do we do that, you might ask? All right, pretty straightforward. So jump into your favorite SSH tool, whatever that case might be, or jump into Unraid directly. Same applies for those using Docker, of course. If you're on Ubuntu, you're already in the terminal, I'm sure. You will be running a command. So open up the terminal. So to generate the password now, while we're in the terminal, it's pretty straightforward. We've got the code written in our documentation. All you need to do is paste that, and then we'll backspace between the two apostrophes here and set the password that you want to set for that user. So for psychotics' password, we're just going to put in password user. Obviously in your case, make sure you put something secure. Once you're done, hit enter. Now what that's going to do is it's going to spin up an Authelia container, allow us to generate a hash password, and then it's going to remove it again. So copy this. So by just highlighting it, of course, with our mouse and letting go at the end, it should copy that for us. If not, use whatever shortcuts you need. And then come back to our user's database file and paste it in. So overriding this template password we've got here. Now the email is pretty important, especially when you want to do your password resets, for example. So in this case, we can just go, let's say, for example, psychotics@IBRACORP.io. It's not a real email address, but you would put a real one there. And then you've got groups. So you can create groups and tell Authelia where that user lives. So in this scenario, we know that Psychotics is part of the admins group and also part of a dev group if you wanted it. You don't even need the second one if you don't want it. You can just put that, for example, if that's what you so choose. If you wanted another user in here, you follow the exact same steps and you paste it from this level again. So then we can say Hawks, and we'll say Hawks guy exactly as we did before and go through the same steps, updating it like that. So now we have 2 users, for example, that are allowed to access Authelia. That's pretty much it. Once you've done that, you've got the password there. That's all fine. Go back to configuration and we can now move on with the list. The next thing you have is access control. Access control is, like the name suggests, what it's going to be doing. Now the default policy we've set is 1 factor. Okay, so what this means is when we apply Authelia to, let's say, a container or to a subdomain in NGINX, however you decide to deploy it, these are the rules that we are going to be setting up. Now, to keep it simple for you guys, we've taken out all these extra rules that we used to have for the template, and that just helps cut down on the extra work that it takes to troubleshoot issues. And what we didn't want is to give people a whole list of rules when it may not really apply to them. But what we did do is take the rules that we had, and we've got a specific section in our docs now called rules under Authelia, and we explain a little more and give you more examples. So I'll show you that here, for example, and you can see all the different rules that you could have. At the moment, all we've literally got is access control, default policy, and that's it. Now, what this policy would do here instead is says the default policy is actually to deny. So we are allowing explicit stuff to pass through Authelia rather than implicit. What that means is, by default policy being deny, everything that passes through Authelia will be denied. If you want something to then bypass Authelia, then you will need to tell it specifically that you want it to bypass, or if you want to set it to 1 factor, or if you want it set to 2 factor. You can set them up for different rules, for different domains, whatever the case might be. So here we have this first rule. Let's look at one rule here just to make it easier for us, okay? So here we have a bypass rule, and we're saying that this is the rule we use for things like APIs. If you're someone that uses Sonar or Radar, as I've explained up here somewhere, usually you want your API to be bypassed, and the reason is that's not going to be able to authenticate with Authelia, so then they won't be able to actually communicate via the API. Authelia will end up blocking it. So having something like this particular rule, in fact, if I scroll down, that's what the condensed rule looks like. That will allow anything on this path to be bypassed by Authelia. But I would not do this unless you fully understood how it works, and make sure you don't bypass something that you really want secured. And probably the most important tip I can give you about rules is the following. They are read from top to bottom and in that order. So it's actually in your best interest to put the most restrictive rule down at the very end. And if you do that, then you'll know that everything is being protected, at least, unless you have a specific rule. So we'll put our most permissive ones at the top, and we'll say auth.domain, so the address where Authelia is actually living. We don't want to then authenticate with Authelia, so what we want to do is bypass that. So let's bypass that right at the top. Then we have another bypass here. Then under that we have some 1-factor authentication. Then it goes into 2-factor authentication. And then we have some separate rules. So you can even say, you know, I want only this group to be able to access this domain, or these groups to access this domain. The strength that we want to apply to those groups. At the very end, as you can see here, is what we call a catch-all. So with that wildcard, we won't have to set a specific rule for every single domain. We'll just say anything on our domain, I want you to automatically apply 1-factor authentication. Okay, no matter what it is. But then the rules are read from top to bottom. So the rules up here say, well, auth.domain should be bypassed. It will process this rule first, which means auth.domain is then bypassed. So I know it's a whole lot of words, guys. I'm sorry if it's still confusing, but that's really, in essence, the most easiest way we can explain it. If you just keep it simple, like this is a huge list, and that's why we took it out. But if you keep it simple, this is what one simple rule could look like, and could be all you need. In any case, back to the configuration file. So right now we only have this one rule, right? I'll show you how we can modify that real quick. So that there could be an example if you wanted to. We're saying that Authelia's domain that we've set up, I want you to bypass it. For anything on our domain that has this file path, we want you to bypass it. For everything else, apply one-factor authentication. Simple as that, done. Default policy is deny, so that anything outside of the scope of these rules will be denied from access. The next section you have is the session. So with this, we don't have to change too much. We just simply change our domain again, IBRACORP.io. Again, we need another secret, so let's generate a secret for that. How long do you want to be remembered by Authelia once you sign in? So this says 2 months at this point. Inactivity of 5 minutes, we'll kick it off if it's lower than this rate. And the expiration of the token is 1 hour. You can leave that all as is, then you've got your Redis password. So as you remember, we set up Redis, so we actually have to set this password here now. Regulation, so how do we want to regulate the activity that we're seeing? So maximum retries for someone to sign in is currently set to 3. It's got a 10-minute fine time, and then they'll be banned for 12 hours if they fail that. Again, you can configure this so we can say, maybe they can try 10 times before they're banned. How long do we want to ban them for? Maybe 6 hours, up to you. Now, introduced in version 4.33 of Authelia is the storage encryption key. So what we need to do is generate a key with a minimum of 20 characters. In our case, we chose to go with 64 in our guide. So we've put a 64 character encryption key, just like that one. And then it goes to connect to the SQL database. So we've got MariaDB as the host, then we've got the port, and we've got the database name and the username. We've already configured all that before. Keep in mind that if you are not on a custom Docker network, then you would typically have to put the IP address of the server here, but we're using the container name because they're all on the same custom Docker network. With the encryption key, just use something like a password generator. I usually try to remove any special characters from the password, so something like passwordsgenerator.net is pretty useful for that. And then we need our MariaDB password that we created. And then finally is our notifier. So we want to get SMTP working, and the reason you want that working is so that if a user goes to reset their password, it's going to send an email out to allow them to manage their account themselves. This also works with LDAP, so actually will work with LDAP. If you have an LDAP set up, then when the user resets their password, Authelia will actually communicate that back to the LDAP database and reset it there as well. Just an extra bit of info for you. Now, SMTP is pretty subjective, so it's really up to you what you put here, depending what your SMTP provider gives you. But typically, as you can see, you've got your user email, user password for the account. Then you got the address that you want to be sent from, so maybe authelia@ibracorp.com. The identifier, so localhost, that's fine. We don't need to change that. The subject of the email, you can change it to whatever you like. The test address is there as well. We don't need to worry about that, and you can leave everything else the same. Now, if you followed everything we've done, that should be looking pretty good. That should be enough for us to actually get it started. And I would say that's the hardest part done for Authelia. So let's test it out. We've got our Authelia container here. If you're on Docker, whatever the case might be, go ahead and start the container up, and then we will follow the logs. And reading the logs is really important, especially when it comes to asking for help. So if you guys decide to join our Discord, you want some help, the logs are pivotal to being able to assist you. So let's have a look at the logs. We can see a couple of issues here, okay? Now I'm doing this to show you guys typical troubleshooting steps to help you navigate through it, because it can be a little confusing, but you got to give Authelia credit. Their errors are actually pretty clear most of the time. So if we scroll to the top, we can see error pinging database access denied. Okay, so clearly we've got the password wrong, and that's because our database was already existing in there with a user that already existed. So pretty straightforward. To fix that, let's go back to adminer. We're going to scroll down to where we set the MySQL database for our user, and we'll say that's our user there. And because we want that password to match, we'll keep it the same. So go to Authelia, go to privileges, go to the user, which is this one here, and untick the hashed box. This one will throw you off if you don't untick it. And then basically paste the password that we do want, come back down and click save. So now that password should match what we have in our configuration file. Continuing the troubleshooting, so if we scroll down a little bit further, it then tells us that it has a problem running the notification provider startup check. Okay, easy peasy. Let's go back to that config file once more. And if we scroll down, you can see the startup check address, which is here, test@authelia.com. And we'll try restarting the container now, and we'll see what comes up when we launch it. So looking at the errors again, we can see that it actually has progressed. So the storage schema migration, so it's actually done the migration for us. That looks good, but it's still getting held up on our SMTP settings. No such host. Okay, that's fair enough because there is no such host called your SMTP host. So let's fill it out with some proper information now. So as you can see, we've got some proper information. Obviously, it's not the correct password or anything like that, but we've tried to make it as if you've got this set up already. So once you're happy with that, let's try again and see what Authelia thinks of that. Okay. So now we can see that we're actually getting a rejected message from Gmail because it's not a legitimate password. It's going to be rejected by Gmail for us. Okay, so now I've actually put my legitimate SMTP information in, and we're going to start Authelia up. And we'll check the logs. And now we can see it's all good to go. So once you see this message listening for non-TLS connections on 9091, Authelia is actually up and running. So let's left click that now, go to Web UI, and there you go. We're confronted with the login screen. So let's test our user. We created a user called Psychotics in the users database file. Now, if you are using LDAP, like I said, you have the LDAP config there. It would be the information that you've stored in your LDAP server. Okay, but we're using the users database file, so we've got Psychotics, and then I created the password, and there you go. So we've signed in. It's now authenticated us. And it's bounced us onto our default redirection URL because we got to the point where it said, okay, oh, you've authenticated, but you're not actually trying to get anywhere. So it just sent us over to our main URL now. If we go back to our reverse proxied address now, you can actually see that it's pulling Authelia fine. It's coming through thanks to Traefik, and it's applying the rules that we need. And guess what, guys? There you go. You have Authelia set up start to finish in the most efficient way possible. We've learned so much more. It's so much easier to do now, and it's so much more flexible, we've found, in the way we can deploy it as well. So you've got the options there. I mean, if you want LDAP, we've got the config files for you there. If you want NGINX as your reverse proxy, we've given you the config files there as well. So in here, for example, we've got your free IPA LDAP. So if you wanted to use LDAP, copy this. You would scroll up and you would either replace or comment out this file section and paste in the LDAP section and customize it to your setup. So it needs to be your IP address and anything like that. Your password, your admin user password goes down here. Okay. So then in that case, we could just comment this out with a control / in code server. And now we'll read from LDAP instead. Let's say you're using, for example, instead of Traefik, you were using NGINX Proxy Manager. Let's go into NGINX. We've got the NGINX config for Authelia. So for your Authelia proxy, you put this in the advanced config. Contrary to our previous guides, you don't actually need to update any container names anymore. It's all through variables. So the only thing I'll probably update here is your server IP. So I'll put your server IP there. And then you've got your endpoint. So you would put this on your endpoint. You only need to edit it once and then you can just paste it everywhere. So you can put the server IP or the container name if you like, if they're on the same custom Docker network. And you just put that on whatever and it will protect what you need. If you are using Traefik, we have already set up Traefik. So if we go over to the Traefik guide, I've linked it right here. It takes you straight to enabling Authelia and getting that going for you. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you really enjoyed that. It's been a pleasure to put another Authelia guide out for you. We've had so many people come to us thanking us for our work on it. We really appreciate it. We don't get paid from Authelia or anything like that. This whole channel basically started because of Authelia. So a lot of work has gone into it over the years, and we really appreciate you guys coming to check out our work. If you'd like to help support the channel, please check the descriptions below. You can donate to IBRACORP, you can donate to our projects, you can sign up as a member, whatever works for you. Our new website will be coming soon as well, which we're really looking forward to sharing with you. And it will have full Discord integration so that we can keep it all under the one roof. Now, something we didn't get to in the guide was installing Open LDAP. and using that as an LDAP database. And if that's something you guys want to see, if you're interested in us doing that, be sure to drop it in the comments below. Let us know so that we can work on it, and we'll actually put that in the written guide for you, and then we'll create an additional video at a later point in time so that you guys can use Open LDAP in a Docker environment as opposed to FreeIPA, which we've shown you before, which runs in a VM. Thank you for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed it, and we can't wait to see you in the next IBRACORP video.